We answer your mailbag questions next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens. I am your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. We return here. It is a midweek Wednesday edition episode of the show, and that means it is another mailbag. We'll be continuing these mailbags all throughout the offseason. You know, it wasn't just an in-season thing. So questions about free agency or how the 2021 season went, the draft, what's ahead for this team, personnel decisions. I mean, there are tons of things to be asked and answered. So I greatly appreciate everybody who has asked questions and will continue to ask questions. These are always fun for me, interacting and kind of finding a pulse on the fan base and what people want and what people need answers to. So I'm glad to provide those answers. We'll be talking 3 segments of mailbag questions, segments 1, segment 2, and segment 3. So no shortage of things to talk about here. And obviously it's disappointing the Ravens are not in the postseason. And a lot of people kind of expected that with the way that the 2021 offseason went and the roster they had, and then the injuries, they just kept on coming. So we'll talk about those mailbag questions here today. Before we do that, though, if you are following along with us on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video here. It does help out a ton. I appreciate everybody who has subscribed already, and for everybody who is going to subscribe, I thank you as well. Where our first goal here is 1,000 subscribers. Our growth has been amazing. It's been great to watch it happen, and it's fun to grow something kind of new. And we've been doing this ever since week 1. You know, I've been doing the show for 2.5 years, but the whole YouTube thing is pretty new. So I'm excited to continue to grow that. Also, we are in audio form. Be sure to follow us there, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Turn notifications on. Our content comes out Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter at KaleStriker34 and the Locked On Ravens Twitter account for show updates. That's at Locked On Ravens. So let's talk about these mailbag questions now. We'll start off here in segment 1, and we'll first start off here with a question from Caleb Farrow, who asks, do we think Lamar is going to sign a Prescott-type contract or maybe something more budget? Parentheses, I want him to get his money, but I'm curious to see how this plays out, and parentheses. And so, yeah, the whole Lamar Jackson contract situation is, I mean, look, it's been talked about for, it feels like forever. But, you know, you see Patrick Mahomes getting big-time money. You know, Dak Prescott was mentioned there. Josh Allen, even the Deshaun Watson deal. Those are the numbers people are comparing right now because Mahomes got that huge deal. I don't think Lamar Jackson, when it's all said and done and the contract is signed, I don't think he's getting that kind of money. And an interesting part of this whole thing, a layer that adds on to it, is the back half of Lamar Jackson's 2021 season was not great. And people are saying, oh, well, he lost a ton of money there and this, that, and the other. You know, maybe if people are saying he lost money, if anything, it'd be just a couple million overall. I don't even know if he did lose money off of that. The performance would say, you know, what are we doing here with a quarterback that can't perform consistently, But there's no doubt that, I mean, Jackson's going to make a ton of money. And I don't think the loss there that people are talking about is going to be substantial enough to the point where when the contract is signed, they'll be like, oh, well, he could have made $35 million a year instead of $34 million a year. It's kind of that. I don't know. For me, I've said this before. The surprising thing to me was the Josh Allen deal. I thought Lamar Jackson would sign first out of the quarterback class. I was expecting 3 extensions out of that first round class. I was expecting Mayfield, Allen, and Jackson. Now, things have changed. And now you know, a lot of Ravens fans are saying, hey, Cleveland, extend Baker Mayfield. Do it because, you know, Baltimore loves Baker Mayfield. But, yeah, I don't know how Cleveland's feeling about Baker Mayfield right now. I personally, if he's asking for $25 million a year, I wouldn't give him that. But I think for the Josh Allen deal, that was something that surprised me just because of the fact that it got signed before Lamar Jackson. Now, Allen's contract is interesting, and you can kind of take away some things with it and just where the guarantees come in and everything. So Allen will be a free agent in 2029. He ended up signing let's just call it a big overall contract. He has a base salary of $122 million, and the whole deal itself is 6 years, $258 million, just over 258. $16.5 million signing bonus with $150 million guaranteed. It's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. Now, For Lamar Jackson, I'm expecting there are a couple things that could happen. Lamar Jackson could take a shorter term deal for more guaranteed money. Instead of the Josh Allen 6 for 258 with 150 guaranteed, Jackson could take I don't know, 4 for 150 and have 120 of that guaranteed. Let's just call it that base number for now, just to throwing a number out there. It's not exactly what I think he's going to get, but I think that looking at Allen's contract and what he got, I think it's a fair deal. For Dak Prescott, you're looking at his deal. He ended up signing a 4-year 160 contract. I think that's more the price range that a lot of people would like to see. Now, $40 million a year overall is not, huge, this huge Mahomes contract, but it's not this, just chum money where it's like, oh, whatever, you're giving a guy that's a franchise quarterback type contract. The Cowboys paid Dak Prescott like one. The Texans at the time paid Deshaun Watson like one. All over the league, you see these big contracts. Lamar Jackson's going to get his. It is probably going to come by the Baltimore Ravens. Again, it seems like these two parties want to get a deal done. So, yeah, I would say average annual value, I'm still going to stick with around 35 to 40 million. I think that Jackson is too valuable of a player to, kind of bicker over what they would call it's just pennies and everything. But seriously, every penny counts here in the situation. The Ravens know that once they lock in Jackson to this long-term deal, it will hinder their ability to build out the rest of their roster. They understand that. They know what a contract of that magnitude does. So I guess a Prescott type deal, as was kind of talked about here by Caleb, is a good baseline deal, just the 4/160, but there are the guarantees, there are injury this, injury that, a bunch of different clauses. So we'll see how it turns out. But I think the Prescott deal is a good baseline to start at. And then from there, you could maybe go down a couple million a year, up a couple million a year, and you can figure it out that way. Our next question here comes from Pierto, and he asks, should we re-sign Freeman for running back 3 next season? Now, if you've been with me here on the show throughout the year, you know my stance on Devonta Freeman, and that is that I think he should be re-signed as the running back 3 next season. I wouldn't be shocked to see Baltimore give him a second contract. I think that what he brought to the table this year was what they would need next year with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, and that is a third down back who can catch the football out of the backfield, can be a threat doing that, can pick up some nice gains here and there, isn't expected to average 6 yards a carry or anything or carry an offense. Freeman was tasked with that, and even still he showed some flashes. Now, the first part of the year for him, I didn't think he was playing well. I thought his production was not good. I was more impressed with Latavius Murray and even some Tyson Williams performances in there as well. But Freeman showed over the season that I think he is what the Ravens need. Latavius Murray is more of a Gus Edwards player to me, someone who was a north-south runner, very physical. They don't need two of those backs, and obviously Edwards is going to get the nod over Murray. Murray's a free agent. I don't expect him back. He was, good, I guess, in his role. I honestly didn't think he played amazing in 2021 outside of that Pittsburgh game in Week 18 where he was on fire. But I don't think they need him. I think Tyson Williams, that whole thing is kind of in the rearview mirror now. I don't really see that. I think they're going to roll with Nate McCrary. They signed him to a futures deal yesterday, so that's probably where they're going with that. Once J.K. Dobbins comes back, I don't think they would have needed a player like Le'Veon Bell, and he's been long gone anyway. But a trio of Edwards, Dobbins, and Freeman, I like the sound of that. You can have the 1-2 power punch there in Edwards and Dobbins. You can still use Edwards and Dobbins out of the backfield as a receiver. I know that the team and Dobbins and Edwards themselves were talking about that. They were excited about that aspect, but Freeman is still, I think, a solid player, and I wouldn't also be shocked if they decided to go younger at the position and draft. I've talked about Hassan Haskins from Michigan as a player who could fill that third down role if they wanted to go younger there, but I'm all on the Devonta Freeman train. I see no reason why they shouldn't bring him back unless they literally do want to get younger. It seemed like Freeman bought into the Ravens culture. It seemed like he enjoyed his time in Baltimore. And obviously that chemistry is very important, having known the offense for an entire season now and being able to produce at a somewhat high level with an offensive line that wasn't at full strength, an offense in general that wasn't in full strength, the running game that wasn't really good for most of the season, even though the stats will tell you otherwise. I'd get on the Freeman for running back 3 campaign if I were the Ravens, but we'll see. It'll be an interesting offseason there. They're not going to invest a ton of the position. I'd be surprised if they did. I think it's smart to have quality depth, but in terms of signing like a 3-headed monster, they could do it. Like, I wouldn't be shocked, but again, where are those resources coming out of? What positions are those resources coming out of if you sign a 3-headed monster type guy? Are Are you taking it out of corner? Are you taking it out of the offensive line, the defensive line? So that's where I want to see where the Ravens will allocate those resources. And I think Freeman could be just a cheap quality option as a veteran who knows the system already. But we'll head into our first break. When we get back, we'll be diving into more mailbag questions. So stay tuned for that, and we'll be right back. It's the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and they contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Even if you're not a huge fan of working out, you can at least eat something that tastes good and is good for you. That way, when you enjoy delicious Built Bar, you can almost count it as a workout. And there are also so many flavors to choose from. So go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off of your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. We've returned here. It's our second segment of this Wednesday edition of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still hanging out with you here. Thank you for tuning in, making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. And we're going to dive into more of these mailbag questions now with a full segment from Eric Clark and his mailbag questions. And again, if you do have more than one question to ask me, I will answer all of them. Now, if you ask me 15 million questions, it might be a little bit more difficult, but I gladly answer, things that I'm asked, and I gladly do it. So Eric first says, this is why you are appreciated. And so Eric, I appreciate you. Eric's been one of the longtime mailbag contributors here on this show, and all his questions are great and give a really nice perspective. So Eric, I appreciate you. But let's start off here. The first question from Eric here: would you trade back to 19, then trade up to 27 to have 2 first-round picks? And so trades according to the JJ value chart. So hypotheticals here: Philadelphia gets 14, 180, and Baltimore gets 19, 83, 115. Another one, Baltimore gets 27, and Buffalo gets 45 and 76. So what we know about Eric DeCosta is he will move up and down the draft board at will. He has shown that he loves to accumulate the assets and use those assets in a way that benefit him and obviously the organization. Now we'll talk about the first one here. Philadelphia gets 14 and 180. Baltimore gets 19, 83 and 115. I would not be shocked if Baltimore trades back in this draft, honestly. The Ravens are going to have a lot of change coming, especially with the free agents that they have to re-sign. They're going to want to utilize all these draft picks, I think. And what the MO of this organization has been is throw enough stuff at the wall, something will stick. They want as many opportunities to hit a home run. Sometimes they'll strike out. We've seen them strike out many, many times. We've also seen them hit many, many times. So for Baltimore, trading back 5 spots from 14 to 19, also giving up that 180, getting back 19, 83, and 115, in their top 20 prospects, at 19, there are probably going to be about 5 or 6 available. It's just kind of how it goes, where teams will reach for guys early, or they'll make sure they can secure a guy they really like. So I'm not necessarily worried about Baltimore not having a guy they like at 19 compared to 14, because they can easily move back 5 spots and still have a guy that they love. The thing that I think about there is if they are absolutely in love with a guy and they are worried he's going to slip to 18 or 17 and they're there at 19, they might just say, you know what, we're not going to take that risk. We're going to take the guy there at 14, and that'll be that, because, you can get cute with it. Teams have definitely done that before. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of stories out there where a team trades back a couple spots, think their guy's going to be there, then a team swoops in and gets them or does some crazy stuff. So there's always that risk. But to get 83 for trading back 5 spots and also 115 and giving up 180, I think that's a fair trade. But again, it's a matter of how much does Baltimore like a certain prospect or a couple certain prospects that fall there. So I'm on board with that. Then you have the Baltimore gets 27, Buffalo gets 45 and 76. This is a trade that, honestly, I don't mind. But at the same time, we have seen the Ravens, I think, loathe not having second-round picks for a couple of years now. Obviously, the Lamar Jackson trade, they had to give up their second-round pick in that draft in 2018 and also in 2019. There were players that they could have gotten at their pick or around their pick, like Eric McCoy, for example, who I loved in that draft in 2019, who could have really been great players for them, or, the Eric McCoys and those types of prospects, both in 2018 and 2019, when they didn't have a second round pick. I think they were kind of sitting there like, and Eric DeCosta said that it was kind of hard for him. And then you look at 2021, when they had the Orlando Brown Jr. trade, they got another first round pick, but they traded their second round pick in the process. And we saw players like Creed Humphrey go, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah go. There were a lot of players who people were saying, oh, just where's the second round pick? And that's why I didn't give the Orlando Brown Jr. trade as high marks as I wish I could have, because trading that second round pick was just a backbreaker to me. Getting the first round pick, getting it off it, it was great. But if you're trading 45 and 76, you really have to like a prospect there that has either fallen a ton, and they have the picks to trade back up in the second round if they wanted to. Like, it's not like if they trade 45 and 76, they're all of a sudden stuck. But it would be a while before Baltimore picked again. They have 10 draft picks already this draft. So if they wanted to trade 2 of them to get 27 and then move back up to the second round, it becomes a lot of chess there. Larry DeCosta certainly played before, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like the more likely trade is Baltimore trades back instead of trading up and giving away a second and a third there. But anything can happen. I mean, if there's a prospect that falls and has like an unexplainable fall, then I'd be all for the Ravens trading up, or maybe trading I don't know, second in 2023, but then it becomes dicey there. So yeah, 2 very interesting ideas there from Eric for sure. And our next question from Eric says, as a Ravens fan, who are you saddened by with their decision to go back to school instead of entering the draft? Yeah, there are a couple guys with the deadline that passed, obviously. Nolan Smith was one where I was like, all right, maybe like the Tyus Bowser injury has put edge rusher up there for me as kind of a, not like a first round need, but a need that they could use. And I know Nolan Smith is somebody who a lot of people had their eye on. There are a couple others like Jay Ward, the defensive back. You have a couple of others too. Jordan Battle. Well, the Ravens, their safety position, that's a really interesting position to watch. Really, really interesting. Rumors of Tyrann Mathieu and whatnot. But there are all these different players who, go back for their senior seasons and then end up not doing well, or they increase their draft stock by a ton. I mean, DeJuan Jones from Ohio State, the offensive tackle. You have guys like Luke Ford, the tight end from Illinois. But, one for me was actually Chris Olave, who I loved, and he returned. He's in the draft this year, but he returned to Ohio State last season. And that was a draft where, I love Rashad Bateman, but I think Olave could have been a great pick for them there. And I'm glad the Ravens did get Bateman, but just kind of the what ifs there. You could even look to a player like Shaun Wade. Shaun Wade was a player who actually entered himself in the draft, actually pulled out of it, decided to return to Ohio State, and then just absolutely killed his draft stock, ended up being a 5th round pick of Baltimore, which many thought was a steal. And then obviously he's in New England now, but it's really interesting to see how much these decisions can impact players, because it has helped so many of them up their draft stock. And at the same time, it's probably hurt a very, very big amount also. I mean, it'll be interesting. It would be interesting to compare who would it help, who would it hurt, and what are the actual like side-by-side numbers with it. But still, there are a couple guys this season, Jordan Battle is somebody, but there are still plenty of talented players in this draft. It's the COVID draft pretty much, because you have all these guys who were opted out and decided to, do that thing, come back, and now here they are in this 2022 draft. But our final question from Eric here, with the Rams blowing out the Cardinals, are you ready for the Ravens to maybe trust more youth like the Rams? Rams have no one over 30 besides their former and current Pro Bowl left tackle, quarterback, edge, punter, excluding Weddle and Aaron Donald, is 30. Ravens have 13, excluding Josh Johnson, over 30. And so, yeah, the Ravens have always been interesting with this. And especially over the last couple of seasons, like if you want to talk about it recently, the Ravens don't generally give rookies a ton of snaps early on unless they absolutely have to. And an example I keep going back to is J.K. Dobbins. And what he did over his first 6 games, he had 25 total carries. And I understand the Ravens had Gus Edwards, they had Mark Ingram, and J.K. Dobbins was like, oh, he's the rookie. He has to earn his way there. But Dobbins was ripping off like 30-yard runs, 40-yard runs. J.K. Dobbins made the Ravens play him because he was playing so well. And if he wasn't playing, if he was average or even just good, he might not have played a ton his rookie season. But he literally, he forced the Ravens' hand pretty much. And maybe the Ravens, this was that they're playing all along, and they're like, oh, we're going to play him anyway. But, Rashad Bateman, his snap count was up and down. He was getting looks, but obviously the snap count for Bateman was something that was like controversial this season. I thought it was all right, but you see players like Patrick Queen play, but then others just don't. Like the team put Ben Cleveland in there after injuries happened, and obviously the offensive line is a key area, but I think I'd like to see the Ravens trust a little bit more of their youth. I understand that they are very partial towards veterans. Like, talk about James Prochet, not even talking about rookies, like made an inactive. And I understand like it's personnel, who's on the outside, who's in the slot. But I thought Prochet deserved many more opportunities than he got this season. And look, the Ravens, it's interesting that they value special teams so much. Obviously, it's a very important aspect of football. I'm not trying to discredit what they do there. But, there are guys who I think can step into that role and play. Like Tylan Wallace, I understand being active. Like he showed throughout the season he was an exceptional gunner, was their best gunner. So yes, he deserved that active spot there every week. Miles Boykin, that's the question mark for me. I would rather have James Prochet over Miles Boykin. I understand, the special teams value, yeah, but I don't know. I'd rather have somebody who has shown in his snaps that he has chemistry with quarterbacks and is able to do that kind of stuff. And he might not be the special teams player, but it was a wacky season for the Ravens. I would like to see the Ravens go for more of a youth thing here where you can trust the veterans. I'm not saying move away from it completely, but when youth players, when young first, second, third year guys are showing they deserve to be in the game, put them in the game, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to me with. I understand this veteran has had over 5,000 yards receiving in his career, or this linebacker has had, 400 total career tackles. But if there's a guy who's performing on the field, just ride with the hot hand, figure it out, find ways to put him on the field. I'm not saying bench another guy completely, but just find ways to play your best players and guys who are performing. I think that's where I would like to see them kind of go a little bit, and we'll see how that works out. I mean, they're going to have to play him this season. The Ravens are going to lose a couple of veterans. They're going to have a ton of draft picks, and I think they're going to have to play a couple of guys who maybe they wouldn't play a ton in previous seasons. But we'll head into our final break here. When we get back, we'll be diving into the final batch of our mailbag questions. So stay tuned for that, and we will be right back. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. It's a new year, and there are new updated desktop and mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. We return here, our final segment of this Wednesday edition of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher, your host, still here with you. And we're now going to dive into the final batch of our mailbag questions. And we'll start off with one here from Bry, who asks, if Wink Martindale takes a head coaching job, who would be the top candidate to replace him? And so, Don Martindale been a very, very big part of what the Ravens have done over the course of their franchise, well, not franchise history, but really big over the last part of these couple seasons here, ever since taking over as a defensive coordinator for the Ravens. And his defenses, despite what people might think about him, like, look, I have some grievances with Don Martindale, just about some of the scheme that he runs, but I also have to say that he's one of the better defensive coordinators in the NFL. For some of the stuff that his scheme doesn't do, there is so much that his scheme does do, where I am more than happy that he has been the defensive coordinator of the Baltimore Ravens. I think that he has been a key part to what they do overall. And so in terms of what the Ravens could do to replace Don Martindale, I think that what the Ravens could do, Chris Hewitt is someone who I think the Ravens could go out there and put in a defensive coordinator role and still be okay. It's difficult because the Ravens, especially for the defensive coordinator position, have generally hired from within. They're not ones to go out there and hire a completely new person. Like Martindale came from within the organization. Dean Pease came from within the organization, et cetera, et cetera. Offensive coordinator's a tiny bit of a different story, but even so, these guys have been with the organization and then been promoted from within. So Chris Hewitt, I think the secondary coach of the Ravens, has been around for a while there. I think that he's somebody who they love. Anthony Weaver, their defensive line coach, just finished up his first season with the Ravens. He has play calling experience as a defensive coordinator for the Houston Texans. And I think that for him, he's somebody who, has bought in right away and was able to, he had the play calling experience. And I think that for him, he could be somebody who could come in and do a lot of good things for them. And the defensive line was one of their strengths this season with the run game. So that's another person. Drew Wilkins, the outside linebackers coach, the organization loves him. And while he's more of, I guess, on the younger side, I don't think that age should take away from talent that a coach has, just like for players. So I think my big three, my big three would be Chris Hewitt and Anthony Weaver and Drew Wilkins. Maybe Rob Ryan gets consideration. I don't know, but I'd be pretty shocked if they brought in somebody from the outside if Martindale were to leave. I think that this is hey, we're going to reward somebody who's been within our organization. The Ravens love to promote from within because they understand that these guys know what it takes to coach this team, right? There's no getting to know the organization, or getting to know the values, the morals, the how does it work to play like a Raven. These guys know. So I think that, yeah, it's Hewitt, it's Weaver, it's Wilkins for me, with, I guess, Rob Ryan is kind of a dark horse candidate. But hopefully Martindale stays in Baltimore. I think that he earned another shot, and hopefully he'll be able to improve on some of the scheme's deficiencies if he's able to stay and capitalize on the strengths. But I still give him a lot of credit for what he was able to do this year with a unit just so decimated over the course of the year. And finally here, our last question from Nikki622. She asked, do you believe the Ravens will use the Bengals rebuild model, mainly addressing the trenches this offseason, or do you expect for us to make the splash moves as we were learning in the playoffs? Games are won in the trenches. Yes, I 100% agree. I've been of this mindset for a while. Games are absolutely won in the trenches. You know, you talk about the offensive line. I think that outside of the quarterback, that is the most important position that you have to shore up, is that line. Because my saying has been, it doesn't matter who your quarterback is. It doesn't matter who your running backs are, your wide receivers, your tight ends. If there's a defender in the backfield every 2 seconds, stuff isn't going to happen most of the time. And we saw that with, let's talk about the tackle situation for the Ravens this year in 2021, where it seemed like every single play, the defensive linemen who were on the edges were collapsing the pocket. Lamar Jackson, Tyler Huntley, Josh Johnson running for their lives, very inconsistent. Now, the Bengals model that this talked about here is actually pretty interesting. So the Bengals pretty much neglected their offensive line for a very long time. In fact, they haven't really put high-end resources into it overall. There have been a few. I mean, the signing of Riley Reif in the offseason was a mid-level signing. They picked Jonah Williams a couple seasons ago in the first round. They picked Billy Price a couple seasons ago in the first round. Jackson Carmen was a second-round pick for them. But they haven't, rebuilt the trenches, I think, as well as they should have, and haven't put as many resources in as I think they should have. The defensive line transformation, though, for Cincinnati, especially over the past couple seasons, has been great. I mean, they had Geno Atkins there for how many years? Carlos Dunlap was there for how many years? I mean, they had a ton of guys on that defensive line. Domata Peko, former Raven, was in Cincinnati for a while, but recently they signed Larry Ogunjobi, who I love as a player. They have Trey Hendrickson now, who, I don't know. I was skeptical of that signing. I give Cincinnati credit. He's been great for them. He's one of the best edge rushers this season. They also have DJ Reader, who they signed to a big money contract, who is one of the best run stuffers in the NFL. They also have they made quality, not even splash moves, minor moves, like trading Price for BJ Hill, who was great for them. So yeah, I think in terms of the Cincinnati Bengals model, I think they should the Ravens should get their trenches up, kind of shore up the offensive line. We saw what the Ravens did in 2019 with a absolutely amazing offensive line. Ronnie Stanley, Marshall Yanda, good Matt Skura, Orlando Brown. You had a left guard position that was just, I think, overall, the Ravens that year with the offensive line that they had, that was great. That was exactly what you wanted. And it's kind of gone away with Yanda retiring and Brown being traded and Skura having the fall off the cliff and trying to figure that out. They need to shore up right tackle. They need to shore up left guard. If Ben Cleveland is their guy at left guard, awesome. Not complaining. I like Ben Cleveland a lot. Right tackle, if they get a guy who can play there and is consistent, kind of have those bookend tackles, that's great. Ronnie Stanley hopefully comes back at full health. Bradley Bozeman hopefully comes back. Kevin Zeitler seems like we'll be back. So then you have, I think, an offensive line that you can be proud of. And then on the defensive side of the ball, things are kind of in flux right now with Calais Campbell and with Brandon Williams and kind of those guys. And even where's Justin Houston going to go? Is he going to retire? Is Pernell McPhee going to retire? So there are things to work out there, but I think that the Ravens do have to really focus in on the trenches, because in the 2021 draft, the thing that shocked me, and I've talked about this before, they did not take an offensive tackle or a defensive lineman in that draft. They didn't, and that shocked me. So I think they're going to really put some focus on it this offseason, whether it be free agency or the draft. And so in terms of making big splash moves, that's really not the Ravens' MO. I think that splash moves have been something that they have done, but they have mostly done that with players from within the organization. They haven't really given out $100 million contracts to guys outside the organization. I mean, look, Marlon Humphrey, Ronnie Stanley, great players, came from inside the organization. Lamar Jackson, with his big contract, most likely it's going to happen within the organization. Last offseason, a lot of people were frustrated with the Ravens and how they did not make moves. They signed Sammy Watkins, they signed Kevin Zeitler, and that was it for months and months and months and months and months before Justin Houston was their next big signing there. So with the way that the Ravens have their cap space oriented right now, they don't have a ton of wiggle room. They're going to have to figure out what they want to do, who is going to be a cap casualty, what positions they want to address. But I would expect them, if they were going to make a ton of moves, to make more smaller-ish scale moves, like medium scale moves. I would love to see him sign Tyrann Mathieu. I mean, the last big free agent money signing we saw from them from outside the organization was Earl Thomas, and that backfired tremendously. So who knows if they're a bit hesitant to do it. I mean, Kevin Zeitler's deal was not cheap. It was not super pricey either. I thought it was a great one. So Baltimore has a ton of decisions this offseason to make, but I think I agree here. It starts with building the trenches. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. When I get back in tomorrow, we'll be diving into more Ravens talk. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you tomorrow.